Hi, hello. Good.
Hey,
How are you? So we want to do something like this. I'm gonna do a few more Hakavanos because I love that. Um, the first one is about doing Tisha Beav or doing Kavanas of Me'adim. So I have a comment which is like something like this. We've been doing. I think we started with like some 2 classes of just the beginning of Shar Hakavanos, and then we did some stuff about Pesach and Spira, and right now it's gonna be Tisha, Rosh Hashanah, and Kippur and Sukkot and all of those things. And I was discussing with Jeremy also. That we probably, if we would have wanted to do Rosh Hashanah, we would have had to like basically start now and get through the whole thing because there's a lot of action and also a lot of fun. But there's basically two reasons why I'm not doing that right now, and I don't plan to. We're planning not. I'm gonna plan if we could. We're not gonna stick to it entirely because I'm gonna have to do something. But at least officially, my plan is not to do Rosh Hashanah and all that. And there's really 2 reasons. One is that I feel like we need a little bit more basic understanding of how things work. And we did it on Pesach, and it's not that bad, but there's some value in starting in a more like sustained, serious way from the beginning. Although the whole Shar Hakavanos is not really that. We should have done Etz Chaim or Etz Chaim at least for that. But and the second is maybe more interesting reason, which is that I could rely on myself to do a lot of stuff for Yom Tovim, because they actually work. They give you a lot of space and a lot of if you could talk about like Skilas Azman for getting into like Kavanas of Rosh Hashanah, or well, you spend a lot of time in Shul and Rosh Hashanah and things like that, or Pesach or Shavuos, anything like that. Whereas the day-to-day life, at least people like me can't rely on ourselves to have anything happen just every day. And that's kind of a problem in the same sense as it's a problem to do things, just start from like some nice drush about Purim and not know like what it's all about. It's the same problem in real life, which is more important to me, really. And I do a lot of classes about, and I'm very pro pure theory because I think the life of the mind is a real thing. But I think, especially in this class, there's like a focus or an intention to have things be real, or to have things be practical in the sense of practice, not in the sense of translating it to something else, but in the sense of doing that. And it's kind of a shame that we don't practice every day or daily life, which is like a real thing. And it's not only a real thing, it's also the vessel in which Shabbos and Yom Tov and all of these like lights and sirens kind of days, like amusement parks, could actually happen. I say this a lot of times, like the true way of experiencing Shabbos, or Shabbos is relatively easy because it comes every week, or any Yom Tov or anything like that, is not to start with that Yom Tov. Because if you don't have like your own practice or your own understanding of how things work, you're just borrowing things all the time. It's like Misha Leiterach Be'erev Shabbos. What does he do on Shabbos? He goes to his neighbor and borrows stuff, right? Or you go to a class and you listen to whatever the guy prepared himself and understood and figured out and told you. And nothing really becomes yours. And not only what you have isn't yours, also the the Shabbos itself doesn't become yours and doesn't actually work. In other words, it's somewhat false. Wait, I need to silence all these things. Shar. No. Not now. Where's stop this? Not now. Silence my computer. You have to silence everything these days. Okay. Bye. Yeah. So in other words, I really believe that, for example, if it's Purim, which is like the craziest day you could think of usually for many people, and you're gonna start with let's say drinking, or even if it's like an avodah or some kavana of Purim, that's you're gonna be fooling it. You're gonna be faking it in a certain sense. The real way would be to start with Moedani or wherever your day starts, or whatever kind of self practice you have, or how you get somewhere, how you do something, and then if it's really Purim, if it's something real, it will enlighten that. So it's like we discussed one time about the eye that always needs to get things come to it. If you talk about, let's say, Moyadim as some kind of enlightening something, there needs to be something to enlighten. You need to enlighten something. You can't have days of light if you don't have what to enlighten. In other words, if you don't know what your question is, you can't get an answer. And the question is really what's you, and some more or less translates to day-to-day thing, or daily, like getting up in the morning kind of practice, not a like amusement park trip kind of practice. So that's why, and I've not done this enough. And that's why I think that, since I do believe that studying these kind of things is helpful for like creating a space in your mind to understand, like, okay, let's figure out what is waking up, what is going to the bathroom in the morning, what is washing your hands, all of these kind of things, because that's the real life. In other words, like the Rosh Hashanah, you also go to the bathroom. Guess what? And you also have to say Al Tel Sidaim in the morning. Otherwise, like it doesn't go away. That thing, and that's the real things. That's the real things that happen, in a certain sense. And that's the base. You could call it like the base, the foundation for everything else. But it's also more than the foundation. It's like the real things happen over there. And of course we could have different ways of actually like moving the like Tode V'Shana Tode Kodim, there's such a halacha, right? If there's two mitzvahs or two, whatever it is, right? Two tefillas or two kavanas that we do, always the one that happens more often precedes the Shabbos one, right? So on Shabbos we do the Tamid Shel Shachar before we do the Musaf, and Yom Tov we do the more often things happen, the more they actually have like considered to be more important, to have more reality to them. So therefore, I want to. That's my reason for trying to. And since we don't do it enough, let's try to go through at least once, like the whole thing from the beginning, and then if we'll get to another kind of Rosh Hashanah or another kind of Purim or anything like that, we'll have where to go, and that's actually where the things that we talk about, like sometimes about every day having Hakavanos come in. You can only have the real ones, the nuance that for every day if you start your day with yourself, if you start your day with whatever it is that you can do. In other words, something that you can sustain day to day, something that you could make happen by yourself, not that you need to wait for some magic to happen in order for it to work. That's the basic reasoning behind that. I did want to say something that's kind of the opposite of that, but continuing what we discussed last week about, I was talking about the remez of Netilas Yadayim, of jumping from one end to the other end. And it's important. It's not really, it's like all these kind of things. I'm saying it as if it's a contradiction, but it's not really. It's just a figure of speech just to get you curious. Shouldn't tell you that, but now you're not curious. Anyways, and we're discussing the idea of, like we talk about leval b'sasot, right? To confuse the Yetzer Hara, and one of the confusions is by jumping from one way to the other. In other words, by not being coherent, or not being entirely consistent, or not being predictable, we called it. And I've been thinking about that more. there's something very, very dangerous in looking for too much consistency in yourself and in the way. I think it's doing something weird here. I don't know why. Okay, and the way that. In the way that you get to things. In other words, give me a second. This is bothering me. I don't know why it's doing this. Wait, something is. My computer is doing that. I don't know. You hear me now? You don't see my video. What happened? Start video. Okay. Anyways, and it's false consistency or false coherence. In other words, I'll give you a very simple example. And I've read this somewhere that week, so thinking that way. People get into fights with their wife or with anyone. Now, there's a correct way to end the fight, and it's just basically say, you're wrong, I'm wrong, you're right, I'm sorry. It's kind of magic, it works every time. Now, one of the reasons why many fights, and some of the fights literally take like 1,000 years because nobody figured out this problem, because most people have an inflated idea of their self-coherence. In other words, if you think rationally, I could just say, yeah, you're right, and it was obviously a mistake because I didn't mean to get into a fight. Maybe I'm right theoretically, but this didn't work. So let's just try a different direction. But people have a big Indian in saving face, or like coming up with a theory why I had to change my mind, or why I had to apologize to you now, and why I have to calm down. Like, I'm mad. Wait, I can't stop being mad, right? So mad is like Yetzirah, like literally there's something that's coming, right? It's not really, we could see it that way. And there's like this big problem with like, oh wait, I'm a rational guy, right? If I'm mad, I'm probably right to be mad. And if I'm just gonna turn around and say, oh, forget it, I'm not mad anymore, that was stupid, I'm sorry, it's very hard for most people. Because we're normal, right? We always like create narratives of how we're consistent, of how, there was a good reason for that. And even if you apologize, you're gonna find some whole story, like, if you're like Haredi, you're gonna come up with a story that, you had people like have long fights, you come up with the story like you have I had a problem and I was thinking that because you were in the Meichel, so maybe we should, well, you get God involved for your excuse to like be coherent, because otherwise you can't just say, I figured out that I was stupid. No, because I'm never stupid. There's some like story, there's something that makes me coherent and that's just a waste of time. And the same thing with like, right, we talk about the concept of tshuva, which is a very important concept if you see it this way. People have a lot of ideas about their identity, like I am this, I am that, and in order for me to change, I need to come up with some really good excuse, like with some really coherent story. People have all these conversion narratives, which are totally made up almost all the time. In other words, they're presented after the fact because you need to like have a coherent story about yourself, and it keeps you back from a lot of good things. It also keeps you back from some bad things, because hopefully you have some good habits too. The Yetzer type, right? Literally. But it often keeps you back from good things too. At least when you know what the good things are, sometimes just ignoring the supposed consistency is very helpful. Like, I often think about Yom Kippur as mostly an excuse to do tshuva, or we could talk about Benadin Lachavayda, as you said, is before Yom Kippur. Right? Yom Kippur is about Yom Kippur Mechaper and Benadin Lachavayda until you Achiratzas Chavayda, right? You're supposed to make peace with your enemies. And there isn't really a good reason why you should make peace only on Yom Kippur and not wherever, Tisha B'Av. But it's just kind of an excuse, it's Yom Kippur, and the Mishnah says that I'm not going to get my kapara unless I ask you forgiveness, so let me do it. It's helping. The Mishnah is there to help you, give you a good excuse why you're doing that. But it's like literally like a deadline. You're like, okay, now I have an excuse to make it happen. But if you think of the real idea of Yom Kippur, it's kind of breaking that narrative or breaking that supposed consistency, that like coherence. I need to be consistent. And we could think about it if it's totally, we shouldn't be too crazy, because like some kind of normalcy, you need to have some coherence in your mind. Otherwise you can go crazy. But you should not be afraid of having things happen at random or jumping into things. At least the true things, the good ones. The bad ones you should be afraid. But the good ones. And it's, I don't know how I got to this from, so that's kind of, so that's kind of the opposite of what I'm saying, in the sense that that's not so. You would see it as something that not built up so much step by step, or not going in a, like, okay, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. It's more of like, boom, boom Yom Kippur, right? Boom Shabbos, something like that. But it's not really like that, because that's why it's not really a contradiction, because it's really about allowing, like that's what we call this the Yetzer Hara and this the Yetzer Tov. Like it's really about allowing the things you know to be correct to just appear without giving them so many, without waiting for, to make it match with too many things, like to make it cohere with too many different parts of something. So that's just to finish the thought that we had last week about jumping from one thing to another. It's not really about jumping. It's about like, if someone, if yesterday I was just wasting my time, and today I'm not wasting my time, and like I don't have to be worried about this question. Like, wait, what happened? No, that's what happened. That's all. It's because it's true, because it's correct. Or we talk about advaikas or different madragas, and a lot of the problems in reality are about like, how can I come up with a story why this moment I'm doing the good thing and the moment before I wasn't. You don't have to come up with a story. You could wait for your biographer to come up with like, so there was this crisis when he was 27, and no, there was no crisis. It just happened. Anyway, that's about that. I'm going to read a little bit. You still see my screen, or I have to share it again? You see it? No, I don't see it. Wait, I have to find it. Oh, it's here. Okay, I'll put you back over here. Let's see if it works. Okay. So I'm gonna do Ben Hamtzarim anyways. Well, it's actually, some of it is actually for every day also. So maybe matches with what I said, or maybe not. It starts like this, and it's actually very short. Israel has literally, like, you can see 500 words about Ben Hamtzarim. So very few words, very few information. Like everything else, it's actually based on like entire structures that he has in his mind. That a lot of other, it kind of connects with a lot of other practices and other understandings that he has. But at least what he has to say explicitly about this is kind of short. So we'll kind of try to finish the whole thing. And as usual, he starts with two minhagim, so like actual things to do, practices. The first one is about crying. And I don't know if he made up this minhag or he's like confirming it, someone else made it up. And it's minhag toiv v'kasher ma'od l'kol bal nefesh. Bal nefesh is a person with a soul, which most people are not. Guess what? Or not consciously. Most people don't take care of their nefesh. If you are a bal nefesh, and this is important, you'll see, it's a good idea. And so this is a minhag, right? People do it actually. When I was in the yeshiva where they did that. Every day in the 3 weeks they would, like after chatzos at 1 o'clock or whatever, they would say tikkun chatzos. Do people do that? Do you do that? But there's such people that do that. If you go to some shows, you can see people doing it. And so now the important thing to the real is to actually cry. And then the next line explains why dafka after chatzos, because in the afternoon, or I don't remember what the pasuk says. And so that's connected to a whole understanding that he has about, and it's actually a kind of true thing, which is that mornings are more chesed times than afternoons. Everyone gets tired, and like the world starts to wind down. That's called Kinot Tzlulei, like the shadows of evening start to appear. And that's actually the reason why. So this is based on a medrash on that pasuk, which we have to look up and get the whole context. Because that pasuk is actually saying something that we have to stop the war because it's getting dark, we have to wake up in the morning, something like that. But somehow the medrash or the Arizal, I'm not sure, maybe the Zohar understood it to have these two saying that it says, Oy lanu kifana yoyim. So like, woe is to us that the day is going away, and that Zohar understands that to mean because the afternoon is a time of din, like mincha has to do with Yitzchok, right? And that's why the Srifas Beis Hamikdash happened actually after Chatzos. And you'll see later that there's some interesting question about this because of Tisha B'Av. After Chatzos and Tisha B'Av, we actually kind of calm down. So that's the opposite of what it should be. So that's a question that Arizal actually asks in the end. So that's why it's the right time. In other words, it wouldn't really make sense to do it in the morning. Like you wake up, you don't sit down and cry. You wake up, you happy, you eat breakfast, you daven shachris. Now, this is a line that I would like to focus on. In other words, this is going back to what he just said, that it's a minhag for Bali Nefesh. And this is connected to what we discussed a few times, I think, in the Arizal's version of mitzvahs, and Arizal's version of the world. The kavana, in other words, the thing that he's trying to get after is something that happens to what he calls your nefesh, or your soul. It doesn't mean here nefesh, lafuk, ruach, neshama, it's just a language. It means your soul, your mind, yourself. And the way he understands things is that they need to give, like we spoke about in Kavanos at Tefillah, about Oir HaNimshach B'Shas at Tefillah, right? You're supposed to get some kind of light from Kavanah, from davening, from everything. And there's different practices, and this is actually the source. And I actually found the Ramak says this beferish in the Zohar, and I saw it in this book that I was reading. The Ramak asked the question why the Zohar has various different minhagim, and the Zohar seems to be very extreme in some of them. Like he makes some little minhag or some little akbada into like the worst thing. Like we talked about Tlos Yadayim, right? There's a famous quoted Zohar, which doesn't actually exist, that says that if you walk around before the Tlos Yadayim, you're chayav misa, right? And that's obviously false. I mean, it's not like Tal Mrs. Bez. It's not as bad as being Machal Shabbos. But the Ramak explains that the Zohar is speaking in his world. In other words, for the kind of neshama that you want to achieve, if you're a Zohar person, if you're a Baal Nefesh, like you said, if you're after what the Arizal is after, which is called, known sometimes as Asagah, right? Enlightenment, I don't know, or understanding, wisdom, however you want to call it. Then these kind of things, sometimes the values of things are different in this world than in like Pshat. Pshat, okay, you need to keep Shabbos and you need to wear tzitzis or whatever you need to do. Now, Pisoi, in other words, not that it's not a machloikis and the halacha really. It's really like because it has something of a different objective. Like the objective of the halacha, the literal halacha is to be a good Jew or whatever you understand that objective to be. But the objective of Soid is actually to get somewhere, and therefore people who had that vision, they could emphasize something which seems to him very important for that, and he could de-emphasize some other things maybe even because they're less important for that. So that's why we have different minhagim, and you see the reasons that the Arizal gives for some minhagim. For this one, definitely, is that it's useful for being a makubal. It's useful for what he calls benefesh adam. It's useful for achieving what he's after. In other words, the Arizal about, and this is kind of weird. I discussed this I think already once here. The Arizal is telling you that you should actually cry. It's not only because he's so sad about the Churban Beis Hamikdash. It's more because he wants to connect you with some kind of asagah, which is connected to the Shekhinah. Because everything that, if you want to have understanding, you need to work with the Shekhinah. You need to understand how she works and how all her ups and downs. And crying is actually, and this is actually at least one way of understanding crying, is crying for her crying for the Galus Shekhinah is one very powerful way of connecting you with that, of giving you that kind of connection, of giving you that kind of opening. Therefore, if there's a time where there's more Galus Shekhinah, like in the 3 weeks, and if it's after Chatzos, which is like the time when there's some kind of more dinim in the world, crying is like his way of getting you into that. So, and he literally means like you should cry. It says lifkos b'chia mamash. It's not like be very sad. It's actually two different things. Like actually cry, and that gets us into a second like point of that where. And there's actually in the beginning of Shar they quote the Ramak. I don't know if you didn't read it, but they quote the Ramak about crying, and this is based on the Gemara that says, right? Kola, I remember something. If all the gates get closed, then the gates of crying can stay open, right? Sharid ma'ot lo ninadu. And the Ramak like translates this into Kabbalah, and he said that your eyes are chachma and bina, and by like crying is making a zivik chachma and bina, which opens the light of Kesed. In other words, crying is actually a useful thing, even without the concept of being sad, because the Shekhinah is sad, because there's Tzara Shekhinah. Crying in itself is actually a very important practice for Darizal to open certain gates that are hard to open any other way. And it's sometimes even hard to even connect it to like sadness. It's something that there's a famous story of Rebbe Akiva saying Shir Shirim and crying, right? And in Hilchos Shabbos it gets brought down because it's a machlokas if you're allowed to cry on Shabbos, and the Rizov says that if you're crying that way, then you're for sure allowed to, because it's crying out of not a really joy. It's like overwhelming. I think like more like being overwhelmed by the amazingness of things. I think that's maybe a more precise way of saying it. And there's also the famous that Arizal is very into crying. On Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, the Arizal literally says, if you don't cry, then your soul is broken. And it kind of connects with what he's saying, because this is like the way to. It's like weeping is a way of opening your mind to a different state, of opening yourself. Moshe Yedel has like a whole article about weeping as mystical practice or something like that. But that's true. That's what Arizal is after over here. So that's what his minhag is about, crying. And that's actually why I think this is actually if you think about it, this is like flipping the script, right, a little bit. In other words, instead of having Tisha Beav and crying and Avela Sachar being like some kind of depressing thing, it actually gets turned into like just yet another way to get Recha Kodesh, like yet another way to be a prophet. That's all it is. And that's why people like that, they're never like really broken. They're never like really, like at least not in this way. They're never like trying to be sad. They're really always trying to achieve God, and this is always the same purpose. And if there's crying is one practice, and laughing is maybe another practice. Actually, laughing never gets mentioned. But maybe some other people. Simcha is another thing, but just another way, just like another. And crying is one of the big ways to him. And as he goes on to say, like I was saying, it's not only, nothing starts by the special times. Actually, every night he should be doing this, or almost every night, maybe not on Shabbos or something. But basically every night he's supposed to be saying Tikva Chatzos, because just like there's after Chatzos Yom, there's some kind of Gabris Hadin, after Chatzos Laila, there's something else where the Shekhinah goes down in the Olamas Beav, and you need to cry in order to connect with her stage then. The Kolshkem Bein Hamtzarim Shlach Lohoysef B'Pir. The nights of Bein Hamtzarim, you should like double your Tikva Chatzos. V'olav Ne'ema Simchas Yerushalayim, what it says, Sisi Yitam Esois Kol HaMis'ablim Aleh, and he's obviously referencing the famous Mama Chazal about Kol HaMis'ablim Yerushalayim Zoich V'Rebbe Simchasa. And what he definitely means is actually day in every day. And this is, the Chassidish Sfarim are very into this, about the famous reading of Zoich V'Rebbe Simchasa, like not Yizke V'Yireh, not about the future, it's about the present. But Arizal definitely means something like that, which is like, for example, in the way that Arizal understands Chatzos every day, is that at night the Shekhinah, every morning is kind of like a B'nimis Hamikdash. So every night the Shekhinah goes in Golis, it's dark, she gets into the darkness, whatever difference is before Chatzos, after Chatzos, all that whole long story. And then in the morning we actually raise her up. It's not every morning we raise the Shekhinah from the earth. It's Shekhinah Me'afra. That's the Kavanah Tzilin Shel Yad, actually, where literally the Shekhinah gets raised to the heart of the Zah. And then it gets even higher, B'Shemon Esrei. That's why every single morning he has like the whole history happening. Like every night is like Golas, like night is Golas, and every morning you have some kind of Gola. And that's In other words, and like the place it starts, this is like an interesting thing. The place where a lot of it starts is in the dark place, in the if you wake up at the midnight and you cry for the Shekhinah, then in the morning you'll be happy with her. The Zohar is very interested in this Mamre Chazal that says, so the Zohar explains this as, if you, exactly it's like some contradiction, but if you, there is understanding, if you connect with the Shekhinah where it's coming down, so it's somewhat coming down, this is also a good thing, also something that this when I'm interested, because Golas Shekhinah is sometimes a good thing for you, because that's kind of where you are, or at least where you start off, which is in the dumps, like in Beav, and if you cry, you connect to that, and then you kind of get onto the train and go up along with her. That's Tisi Tamasais Kalamis Abmaleh. So that's and the same thing if you think about the order of the year. There's something very similar, depending on how you exactly will divide it. But you could think about the Zohar literally says there's different months that are have different attributes. And if you think about, there's the Zohar in Eicha says there's 4 good months, which are Adar, Nisan, Iyar, Sivan. So 4 months straight of like Adar is Mavrim Besimcha, and then we have Pesach and Shavuos and all of that. And then there's 4 other months where we kind of go down, and they're times of Tevetz and Shvat. So there's kind of a skip. But if you think about this, we have to think about where Tisha fits into this picture. But if you could kind of think of Tammuz and Av as like the midnight, and then by Elul we kind of do the same thing we do every morning, which is raise the Shekhinah up until we get to Shmini Atzeres, which is like Shmini Esrei of the morning, like the high point of Shachris, or of the actual Yichud, which happens in the morning. So there's the same kind of process in the kind of yearly. If you could think of, and Beis actually understands it like this. You could think of the 3 weeks and Tisha B'Av as connecting with the Shekhinah at its lowest point, which is by crying, and then once it's Tisha B'Av afternoon, actually it starts going up, and you have 7 weeks of Zayin Denachemta, which actually connect Tisha B'Av to Rosh Hashanah, right? So Zayin Denachemta end on the week before Rosh Hashanah, and that's kind of bringing her up, and you have a nice number 7, which matches with a lot of things. Okay, I'm going to skip this part about Shechianu. That's just halacha. Darizal says you should not make a Shechianu, and that's fine, whatever. Just a minute. Okay. And now I'm going to back to the main kavana of Ben Hamtzarim. This is the only kavana literally that Darizal has for the 3 weeks. And he seems to want you to be mechavne 3 times a day for 3 weeks. And it's like this. And it's an easy kavana. You can actually do it if you want. And it says like this. We have, and it's basically based on the 3 first brachas of Shemoneh Esrei and the 3 last brachas, or the 2 of the 3 last brachas at least. It kind of skips the middle, the middle moed. And it goes like this. I'll tell you the kavana, and then I'll make you a picture. So all the kavana start with the Shem Havai, right? Everyone knows that. That's called Shema Meferesh. I'm going to write it out. Don't be mad at me. And that's everything. Everything is around that. Now, I have to make some kind of thing. Now I'll just look like this. Now the Shema Havaya gets mispashit, right? Like we very often talk about Apsag Ma'aben as relating to the 4 Isis of the Shema Havaya, which is one way in which we could call it as like a perish, like a different. A pshat in the Shem Havai, like Shem Ab is one pshat in the Isyod, and even Shem is like Elikim or Adna in the Rizal's world and Kabbalah generally are like one kind of Pirish of the Shem Havai. Or sometimes we call it something else, we call it one kind of Levush, one kind of garment which the Shem Havai manifests itself through, or one kind of way of looking at it, or different things like that. Now, one of the interesting ways of doing this is we could think of letters before and after the 4 letters. So we discussed this once in like Weimar, I think, about the letters before the Shem and Kim. But before Shem Havai, we have these 4 letters. Before Tes, we have before Yud is a Tes, before He is a Dalit, before Vav is a Hay. So we have Tes, Dalit, He, Dalit. that's kind of the letters before. So if you look at the Shem Havaya and you kind of, I'm seeing it like on the right side, and we'll see why. Like the letters before that are the Shem. In other words, like the Pnimius would be the Shem Havaya, but there's like a way of seeing it from the side, or of like not actually getting to it, but getting close to it, or like some kind of, he calls it a Tmura, like a tzidit. This is like a cipher, right? Like this is the Caesar cipher, basically, one removed, right? If you make -1 on each letter, you get to this Shem, which is Tes Dalet Hay Dalet. And the same thing we can do it the other way around, and we could do the letters after that, which are after Yud is Chuf, and after Hey is Vav, and after Vav is Zayin, and after Hey is Vav. So that's after the Shem Havaya. So you could see a Shem Havaya as having this on the right side and this on the left side, or this before it and this after it, right? So those are two chilufim, two ways of changing the Shem Havaya into something else, which is like, it's still the same thing if you know the cipher, right? If you know by how much to push it, but you don't know that, you don't know what it is. It's we could call it like a bad translation, like a translation which you need a key for to understand. And there's a third one, which I'm going to put on bottom because that's how the image looks to me, which is the atbash, and everyone knows what atbash is. And atbash is literally on the bottom. So atbash is when you connect the beginning of aleph bais to the end, right? And you do aleph tov bais shin. So you're kind of folding the aleph bais one onto itself. You can think about it like that, right? So that's like a middle way of changing things. And atbash havaya would be yud becomes a mem. I don't remember this by heart, but I'm going to believe that that's how it works. He becomes a tzaddik. Makes sense, right? Yeah, if you think about it. And a vav becomes a peh, that I do remember, and he becomes a tzaddik. Yeah, so that matches. So that's another, well, he would probably write it like this usually because it's end the tzaddik. So that's a third place where the Shem Havaya hides. Now, if you think about, this is a pshat, he doesn't say it, but that's how most people understand it. If you think about the Shem Havaya going into exile, or time of later he talks about Hamtzarim, literally like Bein Hamtzarim, which is like straits, or not like we talk about Mitzrayim as being the constraint around the Shem Elokim or Shem Havaya. If we talk about Hamtzarim, one of the ways we could talk about it is these kind of three sides or three ways of the Shem Havaya getting hidden. Or like the way I call it, a good way of thinking about it is a bad translation. Or if you say something in a different language and you don't know that language, then you don't know what's going on. That's a good metaphor for Tzimtzum generally, or for the entire story we call about Levush. Like I often talk about the Maggid talked about Tzimtzum as letters. In other words, if I write you something and you have no idea what it means, then I'm hiding myself from you. But if you do know what it means, then I'm revealing myself. And I could reveal myself, I could explain myself or articulate myself in more direct and more obvious ways and in less obvious ways. And these are the less obvious ways. So that's the basic story. Now the Arizal sees his actual kavanah works like this, where he says the three first brachas of Shemona Esrei are generally chesed gvura tiferes. That's why I put them right, left, and middle. But they're generally if you look in like a Sephardi city, you'll see Havaya with Segel in the first bracha, and with the Shva in the second, and with the Cholim in the third. And what he wants you to do is when you say Baruch Ata Hashem Mogen Avram, so the Shem is Havaya, and then you think about Yevachavan, which is not exactly a translation of thinking, but Yevachavan, how the Shem Havaya is actually what is inside the Tes Dalet He Dalet. So Vivichas Avos, but Us Havaya is Shoina, actually the first, he's saying Baruch Ata Hashem, maybe also in the second Mogen Avram, I'm not sure. Yevachavan Shetuz Havaya Al Tmirosa, so the change, the Tmura is a term for these kind of things. Hayotzet Bechilufot Yot Shel Fanav Tes Dalet He Dalet. So the first bracha, you're gonna be machavan how the Shem Havaya, or in other words, the real way it would work is you see only the Tes Dalet He Dalet, then you know that it's Shem Havaya. That's another way of saying enlighten the Tes Dalet He Dalet with the Shem Havaya of the first bracha. The second bracha, which is Apa Gibber, and this is this Shem of Zayin Vav. That's the second bracha. And the third bracha, which is the middle bracha, you would be mechaven to Havaya Zet Melissa Ba'atpash, Ba'alef Bez Da'atpash, and that's Matzpatz Mem Tzadik Bet Tzadik, which is another. Well, these are the three first brachas of Shemona Esrei. So that's the first kavanah, and that's simple enough. And you can have a picture of it. Now you could think. Now he's going to get to it why he says that in a second. But all these shemis together, according to him, Agimatria 360. I didn't count, so I'm going to believe him. It's true. So Shin Yud Nin, like a Shin, like the letter Shin, but it means 360. Okay, that's these. Is it true?
And what's the significance there?
He's gonna say in a second, I think. Yeah, he's gonna get to it. It makes. I'm not sure. That's the first covenant. So that's you can think about the structure of the Shemoneh Esrei, how like the first three brachas here, like we have the Gemara says, the first three brachas are like the meeting, and the last three brachas have the opposite kind of movement, which are like moving out or saying how we say thank you and goodbye, right? Moedim and Simshonam, Todah Shalom, right? And actually starts with Ritzeh, which is like a prayer for the prayer to work, which is kind of a weird thing. But if you understand the concept, you understand. But that's the mushal of Chazal, like Evet Nicht. If you walk into the king, then you kind of establish the relationship, like Beresovas and Ata Gibdil, three sides of establishing the relationship. Okay, me and you and me, us together, something like that. Then you ask what you need. That's the 12 brachas in the middle. Basil calls that Neshikin. Anyways, and then the third three brachas are like, please accept my prayer. So it makes sense. It's like Evet Mikalu Pras Mirabah, and then he says thank you and goodbye. Sim Shalom is just a way to say goodbye. Anyways, now in the Arizal saying here, so in other words, when we get to the say, so now this is how God looks. This is how we see how our relationship is in the 3 weeks, with all of these Torah, all of these like weird translations. And then we get to the tzai, we actually have to somehow fix it. So what he's going to do in the Hakavanos of Ritzeh and Sim Shalom is talking about being metaken these three shemas. In other words, actually being mounted them. So in the beginning, we already said that it's with Meir, the Havaya, and we light the Havaya in these chilufim, but actually, when he talks about Ritzeh, there's like a deeper move of actually like make it actually work. Like it's not only like Hakdama, it's actually the like fulfillment phase of the story. And like Netzach B'Sai, generally we would talk about the first three brachas as being Chesed Gvuras Beres, and the last three as Netzach B'Sai, so like the actualization of things. So he says this kavanah is like this. So you go in Mechavan by Ritzeh, and now we get into more shemes, which are these shemes don't match so well. And I don't have such a nice picture for them, but generally, Ritzeh is 295. That's easy. And it's Gematria Lekim Demeli Hain. So Lekim with a hay, in other words, like this, it's Gematria 295, and I know that that's true because with a yud it's 300, so that's 5 less. Now you're going to be mechavan like this. Ritzeh has this tzirah of tzura, so it's tzara and ratzah are the same letters, and that's the sod the et tzara Yaakov that Yimenu Yivashai. So the Rizal reads it. There's a et tzara or es tzura. So the tzura, which is the Shem Elokim, in other words, the dinim or the gvuras, and you can notice. We have to think about the difference between Shem Elokim and these three Shem Havayos, which are also like some kind of dinim, but they're not that much dinim. And from this tzura Yivashai, in other words, we could make from this tzura, we can make Ritzeh. So we have to switch the letters. So in Daniel's language, the whole avodah of Ben Hamtzarim is not. We don't actually accept the chadin, right? That would be a bad thing. We don't cry over spilled milk. That's kind of useless. It's the entire thing is about trading. We have to change the tzura into the tzeh, or change the constriction into will. That's the English translation of that, right? And the Shemes translation of that is that we have to change the Shem Elokim into these other Shemes, which are actually the Shem Havaya. And the way for him to do it is by showing that they're the same. So if you think about it, you'll see like this. So he says, Zesod Ben Hamtzarim. So Ben Hamtzarim again is tzura, right? So these, let's say it's tzara. It's Ben Hamitzarim, so we have these tzar, like constriction, or so if you think in the language of Shemes, where the tzuras come from this Shem. That's the source of all the problems. Now, there's really two famous Shemes that are din. And usually we say that, and at least in the pardas that we learned, Elohim is the Shem of Gvura, and Adonai is the Shem of Malchus. The Zohar sometimes calls them Bein Shel Ma'ala and Bein Shel Mata, or Midas Adin HaKasher and Midas Adin HaRafa, or Din HaKasher and Din HaRafia sometimes could correspond to this. Right? There's like lower din and higher din. Higher din is Elohim. Lower din is Adonai, which is also Shem of din, right? Maybe not as din, slightly softer din, but it's still din. Now Adonai with Elohim is the gematria 360, right? That makes sense because Adonai is 65 plus 295 is again 360. So in other words, now so there's two base bate dinim, right? I just told you they're called Bein Shalmata, and we could call them like the upper and higher base din. And who are they? In Shem is they're Elohim and Adonai. Shem said Bein Hamtzarim. So if you're between Mitzarim, so plural, there's two Mitzarim. Two Mitzarim are, and Mitzarim itself, this gets even nicer. Mitzarim itself is also begemat with 360, which is that true? Dash mem. Yeah, no, dash mem. It's 300, right? 250, and it makes sense to me.
I think it's 280.
It's more, no, Mitzrayim.
Oh no, sorry, it's 380. Yeah, shin and two mems, because Reish Tzaddik is shin, and mem is two mems.
Again, ratio Mitzrayim is 290, 330, 340, 380.
Yeah,
we know that. I don't know how he got to, so it's not gematria of that. These two Metzurim, which are Shians, yeah, we have to think about another 30 and make the gematria make 9. Anyways, he find some 30 to put somewhere.
No. He's just saying that Elohim and Adonai are Shem.
Yeah. You're right. Yeah, I was making a mistake. So these Elohim and Adonai, they're gematria 360, which are the two Metzurim. They're gematria Shin, and they're going to be nimtak ismat kalidei shlosh Hashemes rishonim v'niskavant ben shlosh b'Hashem, which are these three Shemes are in gematria Shin and Iska. While they can, and through doing this, oisias tzuri is happening rachmat yiritzay Hashem lekaini. So in other words, when you say Ritzay Hashem lekaini, you ask, please will. What you meaning to say is, please turn the Elokim Adonai into Tes Dalet He Dalet Kuvav Zayin Vav Mem Tzadik Pei Tzadik, which is really Shem Havaya, so that's really Rachmim. And then we'll have Havaya be Elokim, right? So we connect to the Shem Havaya, we'll be Mamti the Metzurim, which are the Shem Elokim, and then instead of Tzura or Metzurim, we'll have Rachmim. So that's his kavanah for today.
Yeah, that's good.
Separate that now even more. And then the Dechat Now we go to get the Sim Sholem. He skipped Moedim, if you notice. I don't know. Maybe we have to figure out something because only I don't know why. I mean, when we get the Sim Sholem, now Sim Sholem is Pushians, right? Sim Sholem. So it starts with Pushians. And the Chavan Boys on Beis Shinim Shabbos Tayva shall Sim Sholem the Chavan El Beis Hashinim Aniskorim. So the two Sians or Shians, Sim Sholem. One is a Sian and one is a Shian. But anyways. They're the two Shians. So in other words, the Tezdal, it's all five Shemes are the two Shians of Sim Sholem. That's one kavanah of Sim Sholem. And Gam, Ateves Atzmon says Sim Sholem. Neim Yachad Odev the gematria Shin Shin Haniskorim. If you count Sim Sholem by itself, how much is that? Sim is 350. Sholem is 376, right? So we kind of have 360 plus 6, right? Makes sense. And so now, so we have 300 twice. So Sim Sholem is also the gematria Shein plus 6, which are the 6 Shemes, which are Havaya and his 3 Murot, and then the 2 Shemes Elokim and Adna. So that's the kavanah of Sim Sholem. And it doesn't really say what we're doing with it by Sim Sholem. So I understand in the first 3 were like having the din. Having the Havaya be the din, be mislabish on these 3 levushim and these 3 tzirufim, and then let's say we're being mamtiket, and then Sim Sholem, I guess it's again like kind of referencing the amtika, so we kind of like include them both together, right? So first we had the 3 shemas which are Havaya and Tezdal, Hedal, and all of that, and then we have let's mamtik them by then we have this Elikim Adna or the Elikim B'Melihaim being mamtik that with the 3 shemas. And then Sim Sholem, we kind of see that they're all the same thing, or we kind of put them all together in one like in one word, which is sim shalom. So shalom is always the ichad. So shalom is putting together everything in one picture, in a harmony. So that's the kavanah of Bein Hamtzarim, and that's all. That's the whole kavanah basically. I'm gonna finish now. The Isla has one more thing that the Isla has to say about Tisha B'av. That's his kavanah for Bein Hamtzarim, and we should be mechavan it for every Shemona Esrei, I guess. And then he has one more thing to say about Tisha B'av, and this is really cool because the only thing that he has to say about Tisha B'av is about Mashiach, and it actually goes back to what we discussed earlier. So he has a question. Mashin Hagi with Tisha B'av, I don't know which psikim of Nechama do we say about by Mincha. I'm not sure what he's referring to. But anyways, the guy I'm looking for the chef. So by Mincha and Tisha B'av, we kind of like calm down already, and we sit on the chairs. Now there's a big problem with this. There's kind of like two problems. One is the main problem is that it seems in Talmud Bavli that is erev Tisha Eshba. He actually referenced it before, and he discussed that that's because Mincha is this time of din. Why it's kind of backwards that we do the afternoon less of it than in the morning if the main tzvah is make it in the afternoon. But the reason for this is it has to do with what it says in the Gemara about Mizma l'asaf elim ba gav nachlasefa, and the Gemara asks, why does it say Mizma? It should be Kina, and the answer is because, and this is how he puts the answer. I don't think that the Gemara literally says this. I think this is his way of imagining it. He says in the beginning they were killing us. We're all gonna die. Like it says, and Chazal say, so in other words, it's interesting that he seems to see it also in the reality. I didn't notice that until now. The Chazal seem to say something simple. It says Mizma Lasaf. Why is it Mizma? It should be Kina Lasaf. Right? Because it says in him and all of that. And the Chazal say because Kila Chamos, Shefa Chamos right? If he would have used his madness to kill us, he would have been lost. Would have all been dead. But since we're just burning, what do we do about Mincha? We say some psukim or something? You're looking? What?
In the Sephardic Siddur, after the Chazara, there's a whole section called Pirkei Nechama. I mean, I don't know if you can flip the video on here. Here, I'll show you.
He says Nachmi on Tisha B'av already?
Right, so this is Mincha. This is for after Chazara, Mincha.
Okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
He's probably talking about that.
I mean, it's titled Pirkei Nechama.
Yeah, so it's that.
So I think that's that.
Yeah, so we understand it as something like being mamtik, the din of God, right? Like if we would have done it on us, on our body, that would be worse. If we just burnt the building, okay, so now he's calmed down, he had his catharsis, He got the building burnt, and now we're gonna be alive. That's the chapter of the Gemara. And the Aizal seems to read it also like in the reality, like we see these Romans coming and like trying to kill us. We're like, wow, they're not gonna stop. They're gonna kill us all. And then they found the building to burn. All right, let them burn the building. And therefore, the Aizal, this is really weird because then the Aizal says, okay, so that's why they didn't. So the kind of when until the Beis Mikdash was getting burned, it was worse. Once it is starting to burn, then we're like, okay. They said Mizma L'Asaf. He literally thinks that they said it then, like at that second when they saw that it's just burning the building. And so it's a good minute. So like some people, it seems like some people were ma'ara, some people didn't like the minhag, and the Chaim Vital is taking the side of the minhag and said no, it's correct minhag because there's actually the beginning of Nechama in the Beis Mikdash getting burned. So when you say those psukim in the siddur, when you sit on a chair, what you mean to say is thank you for burning the Beis Mikdash. Otherwise, it would be worse. Just kind of, and that's one thing. And then he goes, there's a famous medrash that says that Mashiach was born on Tisha B'av, and the Rizal says he was born by Mincha of Tisha B'av, not by night or morning. and that's why we start to be happy. This is actually very, very radical thing to say. But I have to talk about that more in the whole other section. It has to do with if you saw that, it has to do with that. Either literally understand that there was some kind of aliyah of the Shekhinah in the second after the Beis Mikdash got burned, like after the first thing happened, and it's connected to this whole idea of Shofar Kilach HaMasai. Like Tarizal has this idea, which is that when you finish the din, you get to Rachman. I have to think of it not just to this, but there's a tradition in Shamir Terech that says literally that when the Beis Mikdash was destroyed, the second moment was better than the first. So the first moment of like the decision of like let's get over with this is a bad decision. But once the decision is made, we're like, okay, we got divorced. Okay, then there's some kind of getting. Okay, now we have to figure out what to do with it, right? So it's some kind of calming down of the fire actually.
It's kind of a reality, you know. When you hit rock bottom, that's kind of when you start bouncing back up, you know.
Right. So it's like they accept, like, and from both sides, like the acceptance of, and it seems like you want to connect that to what we talk about Mashiach being born on Tisha B'Av, which is like Mashiach needs to be born out of the Beis Mikdash getting destroyed. He cannot be born as long as the Beis Mikdash.
Right. And on a personal level too, a personal salvation usually comes right after you've hit rock bottom and you say, "What the hell am I doing?" You know, and that's usually, you know, more often than not, I guess tshuva is a way of trying to get to a higher place without having to hit rock bottom.
But you always try to do that. It doesn't really work.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Tshuva is an attempt to not hit rock bottom, to do. But then even if you hit rock bottom, Hashem gives you a second chance. You get the bounce back. That's I think.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
It's not only a second chance; it's actually coming out of that.
Right.
Like it's.
Right.
Maybe it doesn't have to be that way. Maybe there's better ways of doing it. But
I'm speaking from personal experience without getting into the personal experience. That's just, you know, that's kind of how it's. Yeah.
Like, let's finally burn it down and now, like, figure out what to do. Because, like, there's something with, like, if you read the Navi, like, he's keeping on threatening. I'm going to burn it down. I'm going to drop you. Okay. We'll do it already. I'm like, let's figure it out. And he finally did it and, like, said, Mizmar lost. Okay, thank you. Now can we talk?
Yeah. Listen, to put it in a nutshell, my life was horrendous. I almost killed myself. That led to a divorce. That led to moving to Crown Heights and